Folks, how are you? My name is Jeremy Siskind. Happy holidays. I'm the author of Playing Solo Jazz Piano and the Jazz Piano Fundamentals series. If you order this weekend, I can still get these books to you by Christmas. It can be done. And I'm going to do the most festive YouTube video for you right now. I'm just kidding. We're going to talk about playing out. We're going to talk about pentatonic scales. We're going to talk about kind of doing some crazy stuff harmonically. And kind of the thesis of this little presentation video, whatever you want to call it, is that if we're in a 2-5-1, like a major 2-5-1 or something, over that 5 chord, I think it's possible to use all 12 different pentatonic scales, which is kind of nuts because that's every note. And a lot of different key centers, a lot of different possibilities. But we're going to try it, and we're going to see what we find out together. Now, before we move on, I should mention now is a great time if you're interested in taking my Fullerton College classes. They start in a bit over a month, but I'd start that registration process now. I will throw a link into the video description. Look at me, I'm sounding like a real YouTuber. Okay, so before we get started, let's talk a little bit about some things you need to know. First thing, probably a lot of you already know this, the standard pentatonic scale includes the 1, 2, 3, 5, and 6 of a major scale. Okay, so if we're doing a pentatonic scale in C major, it's going to have these 5 notes: C, D, E, G, and A. And if we're doing a pentatonic scale in E flat major, we're going to have these 5 notes: E flat, F, G, B flat, and C. Okay, you might just think about that it's leaving out the 2 most dissonant notes of your major scale, right? The 4th and the 7th, those 2 form a tritone with each other, and they kind of demand resolution against the root, right? If I'm in C and I play F, that demands a resolution, and if I play the 7th, that demands a resolution. Okay, cool. Second thing you should know, you guys probably all know what a 2-5-1 is, but let's just get clear on that just in case. You know, we're going to talk in C major, we're going to talk D minor 7 to G7 to C major 7. I'm sorry, that is a horrid looking triangle, but don't hold that against me. We're going to talk about altered dominance, right? And altered dominance is this principle that for this G7, it's really standard practice to change the 5th and the 9th of that chord, and sometimes some other stuff, but mostly finding those notes a half step above and below the 5th and the 9th. So adding in A flat, B flat, the 2 notes a half step above and below the 9th, and D flat and E flat, the 2 notes above and below the 5th. And then lastly, we are going to be talking about modal interchange. And modal interchange is this thing that's a little bit more modern to do, in which you essentially decide, I don't want to say willy-nilly, you want to do it intentionally, but you decide that you want to use a different mode than is generally used for a chord. So for instance, let's just take, we're not going to do this because I don't want to give away the ending. But, you know, if we're playing a D minor 7, that would usually be the Dorian mode. But maybe we want to play Locrian, right? Maybe we want to play Phrygian. And I chose these 2 intentionally because they have the same 3rd and 7th as Dorian does. And so they're a little bit less crazy than if we decided we suddenly wanted to play Ionian. But sometimes we do that. Sometimes we make those big substitutions. Okay, so this is also going to come in as a factor. I think the last ground rule that I want to say, I'm making up a rule here, but I think it's going to be a good one, which is I'm going to call it the 4 out of 5 rule. And that means for a pentatonic scale to fit nicely with a chord, we want 4 out of the 5 notes to work. And notice what happens is that we can excuse a 5th note that doesn't really fit that well. So, you know, an example might be if we have a C major 7 and we want to use the D major pentatonic. Okay. All right, so here's C major 7. These 4 notes out of the D pentatonic work really well. Technically, by the most stringent normal definitions of a C major 7, that F sharp wouldn't work. Now, we all know that it's relatively common to raise the fourth to create a sharp 11 on a major 7th chord, but technically that F sharp shouldn't be there. But by this 4 out of 5 rule, as long as 4 notes of that pentatonic work, it's gonna be pretty good. I lied, there's one more thing I want to talk about, which is sidestepping, right? And sidestepping is this principle that if we have a target chord, in this case we're gonna be targeting that C major chord in the 2-5-1, we like targeting it by step. Sorry, I'll say it again. We like targeting it by half a step. You know, as long as something's half a step away from its eventual resolution, then we can resolve it and it'll resolve nicely. So, you know, it's relatively common, for instance, to do, you know, D minor, sorry for these awful chord voicings, and then have a D flat major a half a step away from C to lead into the C. Or we could go from a half step below. Right, that's a B major chord, even though it looks weird with that E flat. So that's sidestepping, would be targeting a chord by a half step. Huh, it keeps switching me to eraser mode. That's cool. Okay, so now with this in mind, I want to walk you through some of the different pentatonic scales that can work, and let me do it in this angle, that can work with a 2-5-1 in C major. So, and remember here, I'm just talking about that middle chord, the dominant 7th chord. Okay, so we've got a couple obvious ones, obvious to me at least. First really obvious one would be G. Right. It fits beautifully within a G7. I don't think there's too many questions there. Next two obvious ones maybe are actually a little bit less obvious, which are the other two that fit in a G mixolydian mode, which would be an F pentatonic and a C pentatonic. Right. So these are both native to G mixolydian, which is the common mode we're going to use in G7. One of the reasons I say they're less obvious is that they both have the fourth of G7, a C. And so what they end up doing is kind of implying a G sus sound, right? But bimodal interchange, like that's a relatively common thing to do. So let me play for you now, and I'll let you see what I'm playing here. A couple improvisations where I'm going to play D minor, the G pentatonic, then I'll try the F pentatonic, and now the C pentatonic. There's something about that C pentatonic that makes me think of Stevie Wonder. I don't know exactly why. Stevie definitely used those pentatonic scales a lot. Now, the next one that I think is relatively obvious, if you spend all of your time nerding out about pentatonic scales like I do, is a D flat pentatonic, right? The D flat pentatonic maps perfectly onto the altered scale, right? The notes would be D flat, E flat, F, A flat, B flat, and so that, if you look at this chord, it's the flat 5, the sharp 5, the 7th, the flat 9, the sharp 9. Okay, so this is really kind of implying, it just keeps changing me to that eraser. It's not really that useful. Cool. That really sounds like a G altered to me. And listen to how that sounds in context. It'll sound pretty familiar, pretty nice. Really colorful. Now, with that 4 out of 5 rule, we have a few other pentatonic scales that reflect some of these altered tones. So A flat pentatonic has 4 notes that fit beautifully, but then a C, which doesn't really fit that well. And so I'd say that's 4 out of 5. It also kind of implies a G sus 7 flat 9. which actually works just fine. I think you'll find that the A flat pentatonic works really well. Another one really in that same boat is an E flat pentatonic. Right? It's got 4 notes that work really nicely against that G7, and then the C doesn't work so well. So that's also going to give it kind of a sus sound. Now, really on the totally other side of things are these two, E and D, and we can actually group A in. And why I'm grouping these ones together is that they actually work really well with G7, except they have an F sharp. So this is kind of the F sharp group, but they each work in the 4 out of 5 notes of the pentatonic rule. And I do find, especially the E, people use quite a lot. Listen to how this E pentatonic sounds over the G7. Right? It sounds really good because 4 out of the 5 notes, E, A flat, B, and D flat, work really great. You got the 13th, you've got the flat 9, you've got the flat 5, but then you also have that major 7th in there, and that's a little bit more dissonant. I'd really encourage you guys, if you've never had to experiment with that one, because it's really nice. For me personally, the D and the A have slightly less to offer, just because they have the F sharp, just like the E, but the other tones maybe aren't as interesting, right? If you think about the D pentatonic here, 4 of the 5 notes do work, but none of them are altered tones. They're all kind of bland tones. So it technically fulfills the rule, but that's not the one that I would probably spend my most time on. It also kind of sounds like it's anticipating a C major 7, sharp 11, which could be cool. I don't hate it. I wouldn't walk out of that gig, The A7 is a little bit more juicy because it has the sharp 11, but it kind of has that same problem, that it's not as colorful as the E. But again, it sounds pretty good. And let me pause here and just say, this is the magic of pentatonic scales, right? Is that because they hold together so beautifully as a unit, even if a couple notes don't fit, they still tend to sound really good. Okay. Now, coming back to our chart here, the B pentatonic scale could be in that same category, but it also is in a little bit of a sidestep category, right? B, of course, leads into C. I'm also going to put F sharp into the sidestep category. Now, you might be asking yourself, why F sharp? That doesn't seem like it leads into C. But the reason is that oftentimes we play a G pentatonic over the C because it's a little bit more colorful than a normal C pentatonic. I'll show you. And so that F sharp pentatonic leads into the G pentatonic beautifully. So listen to how both of these sound. I think you're going to like them. There's the B pentatonic. I'll do it one more time. Right, and that one also does follow that 4 out of 5 rule, but it also just has the major 7th. And by the way, we could say that same thing about F sharp pentatonic. If you take out the F sharp, 4 out of the 5 work. But you could hear that our ear generally excuses that F sharp because it's just so strong as part of that group. Okay, so this is the part where I panic and I try to figure out which ones I've forgotten. So we've got G, F, C, D flat, A flat, E flat, E, D, A, B, F sharp. I think the only one missing is B flat. gives a bluesy sound to that G7. We could certainly argue, and I think if I had to call a weakest one, I would call B flat the weakest. This one does also fulfill the 4 out of 5 rule, technically, because all 4 of those notes, that B flat serves as the sharp 9, like an A sharp, and the other 3 are part of the chord, but then the C is not. To me, this is the most confusing, probably the weakest one that I would avoid. But as you can see, 11 out of the 12 are pretty good, and the 12th, again, I don't think you'd get fired from your gig. So that's my TED Talk about how almost any pentatonic scale that you can think of actually works pretty well over the dominant chord in a 2-5-1. This is one of the ways that we play kind of out-sounding material without going completely outside of the changes. So if you like this video and you watch the end, comment with pentagram to celebrate those 5 things, and I don't know. And if you liked it, you're probably too advanced for Jazz Piano Fundamentals Book 1. You'll definitely find some stuff to dig in Jazz Piano Fundamentals Book 2, and there's a lot to explore in playing solo jazz piano. So thank you for watching. Appreciate you all. Bye-bye.